is really the idea of the student and families developing, I call it a vision, of what, and this we referred to it earlier, Cheryl referred to it as dreams, and maybe I heard someone else, maybe Leslie, talk about, dreams being reawakened, for your child. Whatever you want to call it, I have found through the years, both as a parent and as an advocate, the idea of having a vision is really, really important of what should be, what the student would like, what the family would like for the student. When Mary was younger, we wrote the vision. You have a sample from years ago in your packet that you can refer to. Sometimes people appreciate having an example, so Mary gave me permission to include it. And then when Mary went into high school, she wrote her own vision. She didn't call it a vision, but she wrote down what she wanted from high school. And we use this at every single IEP meeting. So the vision was in the front of the IEP. Before we came up with goals, everybody read the vision together. And then we came up with goals based on that vision. So it seems to, work quite well, and it moves it out of kind of the legal area, moving it into more of the values-based perspective. And typically, we've had all kinds of experiences with vision. We found some teachers who are really excited about it. They're very engaged and enthusiastic. And we've had other kinds of experiences where the teachers sitting at the table were and the special ed director, they really couldn't see the purpose of the vision. So we found both. But I will tell you, where there is a shared vision, there's lots that can happen. So you do have these handouts in your packet, and as I say, I'll just be brief. I love this quotation from Helen Keller, who said, "I would be truly blind if I didn't have vision." And I'm always, encouraging people. I encourage all of you to have a vision for your lives as well, and your education as well. So I say, now is the time for vision. And I really think, going back to what we talked about in terms of the lay of the land, that now is a time for vision of full, potent, relevant, inclusive education for students who are marginalized and devalued. Really, I hope all of us in here, could hold a really big vision of that. And then, of course, to think for each individual student. So I'll just make some general comments about vision. And this is relevant if you're thinking, helping your family member to develop a vision, or you're as an advocate, holding a vision. Vision is really motivating. So an example of this, with on a personal level with our daughter, when things were kind of bad at certain points during her education and we were feeling kind of despondent and even dejected, we'd go back to our vision. We say, okay, this area is not going very well right now. We don't know exactly what to do, but let's see, is there some other part of Mary's vision that we could work on? And, one time when school was not going well, this was in high school, eventually we did figure it out, but we couldn't figure it out right away. We looked at her vision, and she wanted to work, and she wanted to make money. We said, okay, well, we're going to work on that. So vision can be very motivating, and you just think about the civil rights movement in terms of a motivating vision. You got the images from the civil rights movement, people marching with the threat of losing their lives because they embraced a vision that really motivated them. And we just recently had a little taste of that again, right? The Democrats staged a sit-in. And they were singing, "We Shall Overcome." So no matter what your political leanings are, it's kind of interesting. They're embracing a vision, and it really motivated them to do something that's not been done, in years. So what does that mean for us? If all of us in here really embrace the vision of inclusive education in all of our different roles, that's a lot of motivation in the state of Nebraska. Vision gives you the impetus, the strength to say yes to things that ordinarily might be really daunting to you. So I've known parents who've said, oh my gosh, I don't know. I'm saying yes to this, the inclusive education. I just don't know. But, I have this vision, and deep down in me is this burning of that's what I want for my child. I don't know if it's going to work. I'm a little scared about it. But that deep burning helps you to say yes. And by the way, it helps you to say no to other things. So, countless times through our daughter's education, people proposed things to us that sounded reasonable, but actually when we looked into them, we found out that they weren't really inclusive, and that deep sense of vision, really empowered us to say no. Even though we knew there were times when, there would be a lot of flack and fallout from it. So vision, that just leads to the next point. Vision is really empowering. I just love this quotation written by a wonderful man who I met at a workshop where we were talking about vision. And Benjamin is a man who, I met him when he was in his early 20s. He'd not had a very good school situation. He had, he'd been put into special ed for most of his education, and he felt pretty beaten down and not very confident. But there is a dream that Benjamin always held to, and that was that he was going to be a poet, even though he didn't read very well, didn't write very well. And I happened to meet him at the point in his life when he had held on to this vision. He had really believed it was going to happen, and he had just self-published his first book of poems. Now Benjamin has gone on to publish 3 more books of poems. And he's an amazing guy. He comes to things like this and he writes the whole time now. He writes, reads, he's publishing. And he said, a vision is a beautiful dream that we have. It tells us to keep going, keep believing that nothing is possible. So vision gives us direction. That vision gave Benjamin direction. And it helps us to keep moving forward and stretching. So when you have a vision, it's really hard to just get comfortable. You feel propelled to keep reaching and stretching for it. I have no doubt that Kathy and Kim, in their work, they have a vision of what the school district is. Kathy talked about it this morning. Kim's talked about her work with the teachers. That propels them. It keeps them going back every day and facing pretty hard stuff. Cheryl has a vision. She's been at this for how many years, right? Leslie has a vision. So the vision, so powerful to help us to keep moving forward and stretching. And vision affects the choices that we make. It's interesting. If our vision is limited, we tend to make choices on what is in front of us. This is also talked about by Stephen Covey. So we've talked a lot about families here, and if families' options have really been the traditional ones that have been primarily been not only offered but promoted, then you tend to make choices on what's in front of you. Or you tend to, if your vision is, and that means your vision will be limited. And if your vision is based on the social mirror, we've talked a lot about what's the social context that we're in. Then we end up making or creating a vision that's based on the expectations of other people. So, we drop our plans for inclusive education or having an inclusive classroom because we're responding to the expectations of other people. So it's just to say, this is a beautiful idea. It doesn't cost any money. It doesn't have to be mandated. In fact, it can't be mandated. And you can completely do this. Right, is to develop a vision as an advocate, develop a vision as a teacher, or expand the vision that you already have. Develop a vision as a family member. Okay, so vision then helps us to challenge the status quo. This is a very Wonderful quotation from the Old Testament, and you don't need to embrace the Old Testament to benefit from this teaching. Without a vision, the people perish. And how many people do you know, how many students do you know who are sitting in schools day after day after day, and their lives are perishing? And right along with them, the teachers. I've always, when I go into some of the classrooms I've been in, and I think, boy, this is really dreadful for the students. And then I look at the teachers. Well, the teachers who have, life and lots to offer and lots to give and gifts and talents, and they're not getting to use them. So everybody perishes. Okay, now here's the point I'd like to leave you with when it comes to vision. If there isn't a vision, there's a big void. And I can guarantee you, if you don't have a vision for yourself, if you don't have a vision for your family member, if you don't have a vision for your school, whatever, okay, somebody else will. Okay? And you may not like what their vision is. And just trust me, they'll jump in. Have you ever had that happen in a personal way in your life? Where you kind of weren't sure?
What you should do is...
That's right. And you weren't all that pleased about it. The teachers who work in schools, have you ever had that experience that, somebody else has a very big vision for how you're supposed to run your classroom? Right? I'm all the time. I remember as a teacher, that was a constant thing for me. I think that superintendents as well if they don't have a strong vision. I think Kathy actually gave us an example. If she hadn't been able to say, remember that guy that called her and said, this is the way it's going to be, and she said, no, it's not going to be that way. If Kathy hadn't had that vision and wasn't able to give voice to it, the work that they're doing would never have happened. So I'm not being overly dramatic when I say vision is really important. Without it, there's a void, and someone else will jump in. Lastly, I really encourage you to write a vision down. There are many different processes that you can use to write a vision with, for an organization, for, and with an individual person. Cheryl's mentioned one of them, PATH, which you can look up. It's PATH. Online, but there are lots of different visioning tools that can be used, and find one that works for you. Lots of times, you'd have a facilitator who would be helping to spark thinking and kind of put context around it and so forth. But I really want to tell you or encourage you. I guess I've told you already. Write it down. So for families in here. This was a turning point for our family when my husband and I had always held a vision in our minds, and we would go into school meetings, and in fairness to the school, we kind of expected them to understand the vision. And it wasn't until we wrote it down, we learned to then give it to the teachers, the special education director, and so forth, that things got a little bit better. And actually, the teachers and the special ed directors would say to us, "Thank you so much," because now we're not trying to figure out what exactly is it that you want. It's right down here. We can read it. We can see it. So, I found also in my years of assisting people to write visions, whether it's individual or for organizations, people are quite resistant to writing them down, and they find it quite hard to do. So there's no formula for it. Sometimes you do better drawing, your vision out, just putting words down, phrases down, and it doesn't have to be like a written document, with all the I's and dotted and T's crossed, but just have something down there, that you can go back to, refer to, and share with other people. Okay, you will also see some resources in your book. As I mentioned, there are the 2 examples of vision. There's just some information that I think is very helpful for you to refer to when you're developing a vision. It's self-explanatory, so I'm not going to take the time to actually talk about that.